Hey y'all, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is MOGIBETH, and for those of y'all who are new here, I own a six-figure reselling business selling clothing on places like Poshmark and eBay. And in today's video, I want to discuss a common question that I receive, which is, what is a good profit margin? Or what profit margin do I look for when I'm sourcing? So today I want to go over how to calculate your profit margin and some easy hacks that will allow you to do some basic mental math when you're outsourcing. Then I want to discuss some of the flaws of using profit margin to totally dictate our decision making. And then after that, we'll dive into other profit margin factors that influence what I pick out when I am outsourcing. And then lastly, I'm going to reveal what my average profit margin has been this year, starting on January 2021 till today, August 25th, 2021. So let's get started. Okay, so first things first, when I say profit margin, it's important to understand that we are referring to gross profit margin. This differs greatly from something like operating profit or net profit, because gross profit refers to the revenue you generate minus the expenses you incur related to selling an item. So this is primarily for resellers: platform fees, shipping costs, if any, and cost of goods sold. Turning a gross profit into a gross profit margin is as simple as dividing your gross profit by your revenue. So for example, if I sold an item on Poshmark for $25 with no shipping discount and a cost of goods of $5, I can plug those values in order to calculate my profit. $25 minus $5 for the Poshmark fee, minus $0 since there wasn't a shipping discount, and lastly, minus my cost of goods, which was $5, gives me a gross profit of $15. Divide that $15 by the sales price or the revenue of $25, and you will arrive at a gross profit margin of 60%. All right, perfect. Now, while the formula in math is simple enough, it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to walk around with a calculator in your hand while thrifting to see what the potential profit margin may be. So we came up with a handy chart seen here that shows some basic multipliers that will help you quickly figure out if you're meeting your profit margin goals. First of all, there were a few assumptions that we made in order to simplify this chart. One, this chart assumes that you're selling on Poshmark, and two, it assumes that the sales price is above $15. This means that the platform fee will be 20% of your sales price. And this also assumes that the buyer is paying for shipping, that there's no shipping discount. So how do you interpret this chart? All you need to do is look at the price tag of the item that you're thinking about sourcing, and then multiply it by the appropriate multiplier to arrive at the price you need to sell it for in order to hit that particular margin. No need to guess the sales price, calculate platform fees, and subtract the cost of goods sold and divide by the sales price or any of that. This makes it so much easier when you're out and about sourcing. So let me give you an example. Say I'm looking to maintain at least a 50% gross profit margin. I would then look at the 50% margin column and see the multiplier of 3.3 times. That means that for any, and I mean any item that I come across, all I need to do is simply look at the cost of goods and multiply it by 3.3 in order to get the price that I would need to sell it for in order to achieve that margin. So if I came across a nice pair of Gola sneakers that cost $10, multiply that by 3.3, and now that I know that I have to sell those sneakers for $33 on Poshmark in order to achieve at least a 50% gross profit margin. It's really that simple, and I'm going to put it back on the screen real quick. Feel free to pause right here and take a screenshot so that you have this handy table with you next time you go sourcing. Now, I want to make very clear that this is not a substitute for checking comps. And if you haven't watched our checking comps video, I highly recommend checking that out. I'll put it up on the screen here, because when I say that selling that pair of Gola sneakers for $33 gets me a 50% profit margin, checking comps will tell me if that's actually doable or not. So please don't skip on checking comps. It's a very important step. Okay, so let's just recap. you're going to want to set a desired profit margin, then use the multiplier to figure out what you'll need to sell that item for in order to achieve that said profit margin. And then lastly, you're going to check comps to find out if that's even reasonable. One final quick example, just to make sure that we've got it and to illustrate how easy it is say I want a 60% profit margin. All I have to do is multiply the cost of goods by 5 to figure out the price I'll need to sell it for in order to achieve that margin. Simple enough, right? I mean, can't get simpler than that. And oh, I do need to make a disclaimer that all of the NAs that you see here on this chart are because the sales price isn't above that $15. And if you know Poshmark well, which I'm sure you do, that Poshmark charges a flat fee of $2.95 for sales under $15, and that definitely throws off the math. So again, this is making the assumption that you're selling it for over $15. Now, all of this is well and good, except there is one major flaw with this approach, and that is profit margins are heavily influenced by cost of goods sold. And because of this, profit margins alone might not be the best indicator of performance. What do I mean by cost of goods sold influencing your profit margin? Well, if we revisit our table, you can see that low cost of goods items have a higher chance of achieving a high profit margin, yet they yield you a low dollar amount in terms of profit. The opposite is true for high cost of goods sourcing opportunities like retail arbitrage. The amount you need to sell an item for with this sourcing method in order to achieve those higher margins is seemingly impossible. This is why we focus on profit over profit margins. Looking at our table, you can see that you would need a 75% profit margin from a typical Goodwill outlet item in order to make a $15 profit. Making numerous $1 or $2 purchases at the bins will definitely skew your profit margin higher, granted that you're making decent purchases. But a 20% margin on an expensive retail arbitrage opportunity will gross you a similar profit and conversely skew your profit margins down. And this is why we emphasize that you should not compare your numbers to the numbers of other resellers. You just don't have enough information about their profit margins, their business model, in order to know if their numbers are relevant to you or not. I want to make a quick note about the pattern that appears on this table. The same profit pops up at many different coordinates. A 30% profit margin on a $50 cost of goods item, a 40% profit margin on a $30 cost of goods item, a 60% profit margin on a $10 cost of goods item, or a 75% profit margin on a $2 cost of goods item, all yields us a similar $30 profit. Here you can see that if you focus on profits over profit margin, the table starts to divide itself into worthwhile or not worthwhile opportunities. And this will be helpful as I explain some of the factors that influence whether or not I want to source an item. I also want to note that 20 is a completely arbitrary number that I came up with to divide my table. Each and every one of us will have a different profit that makes an item worth or not worth picking up. Okay, so now let's dive into some of the things I take into consideration when I'm sourcing. We go into much more detail about this in our Poshmark reseller course, so if you're interested in these types of topics and really want to learn more about sourcing decision making, definitely click on the link in our description or head over to MOGIBETH.com. But the main factors that I want to focus on today are our finite resources of time and money. And if you're familiar with this channel, you should know that I consider time to be my most precious resource. But if you're just starting out in reselling, the opposite may very well be true. It's really not that uncommon to feel that instead money is your most precious resource, and I know I definitely used to feel that way. So being the time-sensitive reseller that I am, I want to maximize my profit per hour spent. So looking at our chart, even at the highest end of margins, the majority of low cost of goods items yield a profit that may be too low for me to consider worth my time. That isn't to say you can't find absolute gems at the Goodwill outlet. I've done plenty of thrift with me's at the bins, and I'll link one up here, but it definitely does take more time to find items that have high gross profit items at the bins versus somewhere like a buy-sell trade store. So in order to bridge that gap, most bin sellers use a low cost of goods, high volume business model. And if you've watched our 3 business models video, and if you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's one of our favorite videos, so I'll go ahead and link it up on the screen. But if you did watch it, you would know that one thing associated with the high volume, low cost of goods model is the increase in time spent processing and listing items. And that's just time I do not have. So while I definitely still go to the Goodwill outlet periodically, I would say it's not really my go-to when it comes to sourcing anymore. Now, on the flip side of this, some of y'all may be wondering, if time is so valuable, why wouldn't I just go ahead and flip really expensive inventory at low margins in order to achieve my profit goals? Well, while that's a good idea in theory, the reality of the situation is that we all have a finite amount of capital to invest. And investing in really expensive items is not only riskier, but it also ties up your capital, leaving you vulnerable to cash flow problems. And depending on your sell-through rate, you could be tying up a ton of money for a while before you not only ever see profits, but before you see your principal investment as well, leaving you unable to invest in new opportunities that you come across. Not to mention, for our more money-sensitive resellers, the opportunity cost of expensive inventory can be quite large. Making a 30% profit margin on an item that costs me $50 will gross me a $30 profit. However, let's think about the opportunity costs. Could I have instead invested that $50 into 5 $10 items that earn me a 50% profit margin? And doing the math this way will show me that a 50% profit margin on those items will make me $17 profit, and multiply that by 5 gives me a total gross profit of $85, which of course far exceeds the $30 alternative or the more expensive investment. So that's definitely something to consider as a reseller. No matter how you cut it up though, you can always find pros and cons for sourcing both low and high cost of goods items. And while I think it's a really good idea to specialize in a particular style of sourcing, I think the biggest advantage of sourcing across different profit margin tables is that we increase the number of opportunities to make a great flip. In my experience, one of the biggest bottlenecks when it comes to scaling your reselling business is being able to consistently source enough items that will enable you to consistently list more. And if you're a regular on this channel, you know how important it is to consistently list if you want to increase your monthly sales. So expanding the pool of items that you can flip by understanding the relationship between profits, profit margin, and cost of goods will allow you to bust through that bottleneck to source more items, list more items, and make more sales. And that's really one of the big reasons why I continue to diversify my sourcing strategy, because not only does it help me mitigate the major risk of being overly reliant on a singular source, but it allows me to move the volume necessary in order to attain my reselling goals. Okay, so with that being said, I want to thank y'all who have made it to the end of this video. If you found it helpful, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And also, please feel free to share this video with other like-minded resellers. But now, the moment that I promised, I want to share our average profit for this year across all sales platforms. So that number is 61.2%. Hopefully that helps answer a lot of y'all's questions, and hopefully after watching this video you can start to understand that that profit margin number may be relevant or it may not be relevant to you at all. Is a 61% profit margin good? Is it bad? That's really up to you and your business model. And in our business model, we're just trying to slowly move that needle up a little bit every day, and that's really been working so far. So perhaps this is a helpful benchmark for some of y'all, but again, I would be really cautious when comparing apples to oranges. All right, y'all, I hope that was a helpful overview of profit margins, providing an understanding of how they work, some shortcuts you can use, limitations of profit margins, and how important they are when making decisions in your reselling business. We'll be back next week, and we'll either be applying these concepts to a retail arbitrage video or a Goodwill bins video. So let me know in the comments down below which one you'd prefer to see on our channel. But that's all for now. I will see y'all in the next one. Okay, love y'all. Bye.